There's a quiet, insidious weight that slowly creeps into the solo weight you might not even recognize at first. It begins as a faint fatigue, a tiredness that lingers just beneath the surface, unnoticed, but over time, it grows and its presence becomes undeniable. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, it tightens its grip. The demands of life work, relationships, societal expectations become a suffocating force, each day pushing you further toward a point of collapse. And yet, you keep going. You get up each morning, not out of eagerness, but out of obligation. You move through the motions, checking emails, making calls, attending meetings, but you feel disconnected, as though your body is moving without your mind fully present. The very act of existing starts to feel like an immense chore, a long, drawn-out struggle. You smile, but it's hollow. You laugh, but it's shallow. The emotional exhaustion has taken root, and now, it's the dominant force shaping your every action. You're a shadow of yourself, running on autopilot, your mind too worn out to question where it all went wrong. This is emotional exhaustion, and while it may seem like a personal struggle, a private battle waged behind closed doors, it is, in fact, a societal plague. It isn't just you who is worn out. It isn't just you who feels trapped by an invisible force pulling you deeper into the abyss of fatigue. No, this is a collective condition, one shaped by the very structure of the world we live in. The pressures of modern life, the endless cycle of productivity, the pervasive sense of not doing enough, of not being enough, all push us toward the brink. But why? Why has this exhaustion, this numbing fatigue, become so ubiquitous? Is it simply a matter of overwork? Or is there something more to this story, something darker and deeper at play? The answer is both simple and unsettling. The systems we operate within, the very fabric of our society, are designed to keep us in a constant state of depletion. We are encouraged to give more, to do more, to push ourselves beyond our limits. All the while, we are told that this is normal, even desirable. But deep down, we know something is wrong. The human spirit was never meant to function this way. And yet, we are forced to conform to a reality that demands we sacrifice our well-being for the sake of progress, for the sake of productivity, for the sake of an endless race toward an ever-elusive goal. In the coming moments, we will dive deep into the forces at play, the historical, psychological, and societal structures that have led us to this point. We will uncover the hidden mechanisms driving emotional exhaustion, and in doing so, perhaps find a way to understand it and ultimately to cure it. But first, let's explore the roots of this pervasive condition. Let's uncover how emotional exhaustion has become the new normal. It is almost impossible to escape the relentless demands of modern life, the constant pressure to achieve, to do more, to be more. We live in a world that seems to perpetually push us toward a breaking point. Work doesn't end when we clock out. It follows us home, into our nights and weekends. Our phones buzz with notifications, each one demanding our attention, each one reinforcing the idea that we must never stop. This is not a personal failing. This is a system designed to keep us running, to keep us busy, and in the process, to wear us down. But where did this system come from? And why does it seem like the very fabric of our existence is built on an unrelenting cycle of emotional and mental depletion? To understand the roots of emotional exhaustion, we must look deeper into the forces that shape our world and the historical and philosophical forces that have set the stage for this modern plague. It began centuries ago with the rise of industrialization. The Industrial Revolution marked a seismic shift in how humans interacted with work. Before this, the rhythm of life was dictated by the seasons, by the natural ebb and flow of time. Work was cyclical, tied to the land and the seasons, and there was space for rest, for reflection, for renewal. But as factories sprang up and machines took over, work became something mechanical, something disconnected from the rhythms of nature. It became about output: how much can be produced, how much can be sold, how much profit can be made. The human worker, once seen as an integral part of a community, was now seen as a cog in the machine, a unit to be maximized for efficiency. Capitalism, with its relentless pursuit of profit, began to reshape every aspect of life. The factory floor, with its rigid hours and demands for constant output, was no longer just a space for work. It became a model for all of society. The concept of time itself was redefined not as a natural progression of events, but as a commodity. Every minute, every hour became something that could be spent, bought, or sold. In this new world, rest became a luxury. Taking time off, slowing down was seen as unproductive, a sign of weakness. The hustle culture began to take shape, a culture that told us that we were not enough unless we were working, pushing, grinding, striving. This culture has only intensified with the advent of modern technology, where work is no longer confined to physical spaces or limited hours. Our smartphones, our laptops, our email inboxes, all of these keep us connected, keep us tethered to the grind 24/7. But it's not just the external pressures of work that contribute to emotional exhaustion. The media plays a critical role as well. From the moment we wake up to the moment we sleep, we are bombarded with images of success, beauty, wealth, and happiness, idealized versions of life that are often unattainable and always fleeting. Social media has taken this bombardment to a new level. Every scroll, every post, every notification reinforces the idea that our lives are incomplete, that we are not doing enough, that we are falling behind. In this environment, where rest is demonized and achievement is glorified, where comparison is built into the very fabric of our digital lives, emotional exhaustion becomes almost inevitable. We are forced to keep up with an ever-moving treadmill, but no matter how fast we run, we never seem to get closer to the finish line. The philosophical implications of this are profound. We must ask ourselves, why do we accept this? Why do we willingly submit ourselves to a system that demands more than we can give? The philosopher Byung-Chul Han describes this modern condition as one of psychic labor. He argues that we are no longer just working with our bodies. We are working with our minds, constantly processing information, constantly evaluating ourselves and our place in the world. Our emotional energy, our mental resources are drained in ways that are often invisible, even to ourselves. What makes this even more insidious is that the work we do, both emotional and intellectual, has become undervalued. In a world obsessed with tangible productivity, things like emotional labor, self-reflection, and mental health are not prioritized. These are seen as secondary, unimportant, and yet, it is precisely these elements that sustain us as human beings. When we fail to take care of our emotional and mental health, when we fail to nurture our ability to reflect, to connect, to find meaning, we are left hollowed out, running on fumes. The great existential thinkers of the 20th century, such as Jean-Paul Sartre and Albert Camus, warned us of the dangers of living in a world that prioritizes efficiency and productivity above all else. Sartre argued that in a world defined by the pursuit of goals, we lose sight of the very essence of what it means to be human, the ability to choose, to find meaning, to experience life in all its richness. Camus, in his exploration of the absurd, questioned the value of a life defined solely by work and achievement, suggesting that in our search for meaning, we often ignore the fundamental human need for rest, for reflection, for stillness. Today, we find ourselves in a world that has taken these warnings and turned them into a blueprint for existence. We are caught in an endless loop of labor, both physical and psychic, and the toll it takes is becoming increasingly apparent. Emotional exhaustion is no longer the exception, it has become the norm. More people than ever are experiencing burnout, anxiety, and depression, and yet the world continues to demand more. We are caught in a vicious cycle. The harder we push, the more we exhaust ourselves. And the more we exhaust ourselves, the harder we push. But how did we end up here? How did we create a world in which emotional depletion is the price of success? The answer lies in the very structure of the system we have built. A system that thrives on constant labor, that values profit over people, that teaches us that our worth is tied to our productivity. In this world, rest is not a necessity, it is a luxury. And as long as we continue to buy into the system, we will continue to pay the price. The key question, then, is not whether we are emotionally exhausted, it's why we have allowed this to happen, and whether we are willing to break free from the forces that keep us trapped in this cycle. To understand this fully, we must explore how these forces have shaped us, how they have conditioned us to accept exhaustion as a way of life, and in doing so, perhaps we can begin to find a way out. As we delve deeper into this story, we must ask, how did emotional exhaustion become the price of progress? And more importantly, how do we escape this system before it consumes us completely? The answer, it seems, lies not in doing more, but in doing less, rethinking the very structures that govern our lives and finding new ways to restore balance, to reconnect with ourselves, and to reclaim our emotional health. But the path toward change is not easy. To heal from emotional exhaustion, we must first confront the very system that caused it. And that is a journey that begins not with action, but with reflection. Emotional exhaustion does not begin as an obvious feeling. It doesn't announce itself as something disruptive. Instead, it creeps in, subtle and insidious, like the gradual sinking of the sun beneath the horizon. At first, it's just a sense of fatigue that doesn't seem to go away. You might tell yourself that you're just stressed, that a few good nights of sleep will make everything better. But as days stretch into weeks, and weeks into months, the exhaustion doesn't relent, it deepens. It seeps into your very mind, dulling your emotions, clouding your thoughts, and slowly erasing your sense of self. What is happening in the mind of someone who is emotionally exhausted? Is it just a matter of being tired, as we often dismiss it to be, or is there something far more profound at work? To truly understand emotional exhaustion, we must look deeper into the psychological forces at play. To do so, we must first explore how our minds, shaped by both our experiences and the broader pressures of society, react when pushed beyond their limits. Freud once argued that much of our psychological suffering stems from the tension between our desires and the demands of the external world. This tension, he believed, created anxiety, which would eventually find expression in various forms, whether as neurosis, depression, or some other disordered state. Emotional exhaustion, from a Freudian perspective, could be seen as a manifestation of this tension. The individual, confronted with the insatiable demands of society, finds themselves torn between their authentic desires and the need to conform, to produce, to meet the expectations placed upon them. But it's not just the external world that plays a role in emotional exhaustion. It's also the internal conflict. Carl Jung, Freud's contemporary, took a different approach to understanding human suffering. He argued that the psyche is made up of both conscious and unconscious elements, and when there is an imbalance between the two, it results in psychological distress. Emotional exhaustion, in Jungian terms, could be seen as the product of a disconnected psyche where the individual is so out of touch with their true self, their inner world, that they begin to lose their sense of purpose and direction. The tension between the conscious demands of the world and the unconscious desires of the self creates an inner conflict that leads to a sense of depletion, a feeling of being drained, of not having enough to give. Both Freud and Jung help us understand how emotional exhaustion is not merely about physical fatigue, it's about a deeper, more profound disconnect from ourselves. But what happens when this disconnect is prolonged? When the person feels they have been functioning in a world that demands constant output, but their internal resources have long since been depleted. This is where modern psychological theory, particularly cognitive behavioral therapy (CBT), can offer insight. CBT focuses on the patterns of thinking and behavior that contribute to emotional distress. One key concept within CBT is the idea of cognitive distortions, negative thought patterns that exacerbate stress and anxiety. A person who is emotionally exhausted may begin to view the world through a lens of pessimism, seeing challenges as insurmountable and perceiving their own abilities as inadequate. These cognitive distortions feed into the exhaustion, creating a cycle where negative thoughts lead to further burnout, which in turn fuels more negative thinking. It becomes a vicious cycle that is incredibly difficult to break. But the psychological manifestations of emotional exhaustion are not limited to just negative thinking. Emotional exhaustion can manifest physically as well through symptoms like chronic stress, headaches, digestive problems, or sleep disturbances. It becomes a mental and physical condition, an overwhelming sense of depletion that takes on a life of its own. And as the exhaustion deepens, People begin to experience what is known as burnout syndrome, an epidemic in modern society. Burnout is more than just a fancy term for being tired. It's a complex psychological syndrome that affects individuals on multiple levels. It starts with emotional exhaustion, but it also includes depersonalization, feeling disconnected from others, and losing the ability to empathize, and a diminished sense of personal accomplishment. People who are burned out often feel like they are going through the motions of life, but without any sense of meaning or satisfaction. They feel overwhelmed by their responsibilities, and no matter how hard they try, they can't seem to catch up. They may even begin to question their own worth, wondering if they are simply incapable of handling the demands placed upon them. The experience of burnout is not only painful, but it also undermines the very foundation of a person's identity. When someone is emotionally exhausted, they often feel that their core self is no longer recognizable. Their passions, their desires, their motivations, all of these become muted. The exhaustion doesn't just steal their energy, it steals their sense of self. They become disconnected from the person they once were, and from the things that once brought them joy. The exhaustion becomes an oppressive force that drowns out everything else. This disconnection is what makes emotional exhaustion so dangerous. It's not just a matter of feeling tired. It's a matter of losing touch with your authentic desires, with your purpose, with the very essence of who you are. It's a crisis of identity, a psychological unraveling that occurs when the demands of the world become so overwhelming that they obscure the most important truths about yourself. Let's look at a case study to bring this to life. Meet Sarah, a 34-year-old marketing executive who is at the peak of her career. She is successful, driven, and constantly on the go. Sarah has always been someone who prides herself on her ability to handle multiple tasks at once. But over the past year, things have changed. Her work has intensified, deadlines are tighter, expectations higher, and the pressure to perform has never been more overwhelming. She finds herself working late into the night, answering emails on weekends, constantly connected to her job. At first, Sarah tells herself that it's just a temporary phase, that she can handle it. But gradually, the exhaustion begins to take its toll. She feels drained, both physically and emotionally. She begins to isolate herself from friends and family, unable to find the energy to engage in social activities. Even her favorite hobbies, reading, painting, no longer bring her joy. She feels detached from the things that once gave her a sense of purpose. As her emotional exhaustion deepens, Sarah begins to question herself. Am I just lazy? Why can't I keep up? Why am I so tired all the time? These thoughts spiral, feeding into a sense of self-doubt and guilt. She feels as though she is failing, not just at work, but at life itself. The exhaustion has clouded her ability to connect with her authentic self, and she finds herself slipping further into the abyss of burnout. Sarah's story is not unique. It's the story of so many people today, people who are caught in the crossfire between societal expectations and personal limitations. People who are emotionally drained, who feel as though they have given everything they have, but still cannot keep up with the demands placed upon them. The psychology of emotional exhaustion is not just about fatigue, it's about the erosion of self, the disconnect from what truly matters. It's about a system that pushes us beyond our limits and, in doing so, forces us to confront the dark side of our own minds. The psychological toll of emotional exhaustion is profound, but it is also a symptom of something far larger: a societal structure that values productivity over well-being, and that demands more than we can give. But the question remains, how do we break free from this cycle? How do we reclaim our sense of self and restore balance in our lives? To answer this, we must first understand the underlying causes of emotional exhaustion, and then, perhaps, we can begin to chart a path toward healing. In the relentless rush of modern life, the noise never seems to stop. The endless cycle of work, obligations, and expectations takes up every moment of our attention. We move from one task to the next, often without pause, as though the very act of doing is the essence of our existence. But in this constant motion, we risk losing something fundamental, something at the core of who we are. That something is meaning. The philosopher Viktor Frankl, a man who endured the horrors of Auschwitz, wrote about his realization that even in the most dire of circumstances, people could endure if they had a sense of purpose. Frankl argued that the search for meaning is the primary drive in human life, more so than the search for pleasure or power. And yet, in the modern world, we seem to have abandoned this pursuit. Instead, we have become obsessed with doing, for the sake of doing, pushing ourselves beyond our limits in a constant pursuit of success, productivity, and achievement. But for what? What happens when the work, the hustle, and the grind no longer serve a deeper purpose, and we are left only with the hollow echo of our own exhaustion? Carl Jung, too, spoke of this crisis in his exploration of the human psyche. He warned that modern society, in its quest for efficiency and material success, had severed its connection to the deeper aspects of the self. In the process, he believed that people had become disconnected from their inner world, the part of us that seeks meaning, authenticity, and connection to something greater than the self. Jung saw this disconnection as the root cause of existential crises, of burnout, and of emotional exhaustion. He argued that without a sense of inner meaning, without a connection to something transcendent, we are doomed to feel empty, isolated, and lost. This tension between being and doing lies at the heart of the spiritual crisis that is fueling modern burnout. We live in a world that constantly demands more from us, pushing us to do more, achieve more, and become more. Yet, in the midst of this frantic doing, we often forget to pause and ask ourselves, who are we becoming, and why does it matter? In many ways, modernity has stripped us of our connection to meaning. We are told that success is defined by our external achievements, our job titles, our income, our social status. But what happens when these external markers of success fail to fulfill us? What happens when the pursuit of material gain, the chase for recognition, or the race toward productivity leaves us feeling empty inside? The result is a profound spiritual emptiness, a sense that we are moving through life without ever truly living. This disconnection from meaning is not just a philosophical problem, it is a deeply spiritual one. As we become more and more detached from the things that give our lives meaning, community, nature, spirituality, we also lose sight of the values that should guide our actions. Instead of living in alignment with our inner values, we find ourselves chasing the ever-elusive carrot of external validation. But no matter how fast we run, we are always left feeling like we are falling short, that we are not enough, that our work, our efforts, and our achievements will never be enough. This is the paradox of the modern world. The more we do, the less we feel. The more we achieve, the less fulfilled we become. It is a world built on the assumption that success and fulfillment come from external sources. But what if true fulfillment lies within? What if, instead of constantly pushing ourselves to do more, we could find meaning in simply being present, being connected, being authentic? The modern search for meaning often seems drowned out by the constant barrage of distractions that surround us. We live in an age where information flows relentlessly, where screens demand our attention at every turn, and where the noise of the outside world often drowns out the voice of our inner selves. But in this age of constant stimulation, we also face a crisis of isolation. Community, once a cornerstone of human existence, has frayed, leaving many people adrift. We no longer gather round the hearth with our families or neighbors, sharing stories and wisdom passed down through generations. Instead, we have become isolated, seeking solace in digital connections that are often shallow and fleeting. This isolation compounds the spiritual crisis at the core of emotional exhaustion. As we become more disconnected from each other, we also become more disconnected from the natural world. In a society that prizes efficiency and progress, nature has been relegated to the background. The fields, the forests, the rivers, these once vital spaces where we could find solace and a sense of belonging, are now seen as places to escape from, rather than places to reconnect with. We are constantly reminded that time is money, that there is always more to be done, and that nature's rhythms, slow, steady, and grounded, no longer fit into the hyper-productive pace of modern life. And yet, it is precisely in these slower, more natural rhythms that we can rediscover meaning. As we disconnect from the rush, the grind, and the pressure to do, We may find that it is in the stillness, the quiet moments of reflection, that we reconnect with what truly matters. In the words of the poet Rainer Maria Rilke, the purpose of life is not to be happy, it is to be at peace. This peace comes not from doing, but from being present, being still, being connected to the world around us. The spiritual crisis at the core of emotional exhaustion is not a modern invention, but a deep-seated issue that has been growing for centuries. We can trace this crisis back to the Industrial Revolution, when the forces of capitalism began to redefine human existence. The factory system demanded more and more from the workers, and the drive for profit and productivity became the driving force of society. As the world became increasingly mechanized, so did our understanding of the human being. We were no longer seen as individuals with unique needs, desires, and inner worlds. Instead, we became cogs in the machine of productivity, valued only for our output. This shift in how we viewed ourselves led to a profound disconnection from the soul. The relentless pursuit of efficiency and success left little room for the consideration of deeper spiritual needs. Over time, this disconnection has deepened, and today, it is at the root of the emotional exhaustion that so many of us experience. We live in a world where we are told to keep pushing, keep achieving, and keep doing, but we are rarely asked why. And in the absence of that why, we are left with the emptiness of our own lives, devoid of deeper meaning and purpose. In this context, burnout is not just a personal crisis, it is a societal one. It is the result of a system that has forgotten the importance of meaning and connection. It is the product of a world that values productivity over well-being, that rewards external achievement while neglecting the internal needs of the soul. But perhaps, in the midst of this crisis, there's an opportunity, a chance to reclaim what has been lost, a chance to ask ourselves what truly matters, to reconnect with the deeper values that once guided our lives, and to find meaning in the simple act of being. The spiritual crisis that underlies emotional exhaustion is not something that can be fixed by simply taking a vacation or getting more sleep. It is something that requires a fundamental shift in how we approach our lives. Instead of defining ourselves by what we do, we must learn to define ourselves by who we are. We must reclaim the meaning that has been lost in the rush to achieve, and rediscover the joy that comes from simply being present in the world. Only then can we hope to heal from the exhaustion that has gripped us and perhaps, finally, begin to live in a way that is truly fulfilling. In the not-so-distant past, emotional exhaustion was seen as an anomaly, something rare and specific to those who had faced extreme hardship or personal trauma. But over the last few decades, a dramatic shift has occurred. What was once considered a rare condition is now a modern epidemic. Anxiety, depression, burnout, these terms, once whispered in medical journals, have become part of the everyday lexicon. They are no longer seen as exceptional occurrences, but as commonplace struggles, affecting people across all walks of life, from young adults to seasoned professionals. In the United States alone, the National Institute of Mental Health estimates that nearly 1 in 5 adults experiences some form of mental illness each year. A staggering 40 million Americans live with anxiety disorders, while depression affects an estimated 17.3 million adults. These statistics are not just numbers, they are a reflection of a broader cultural shift, one that sees emotional exhaustion not as a rare affliction, but as the default state for many people. The rapid rise of these conditions signals something deeper, a societal change that cannot be ignored. But what exactly is driving this shift? What is it about the modern world that is making emotional exhaustion a pervasive and almost inevitable part of the human experience? To begin to answer these questions, we must first look at the structure of modern society itself. We live in a world that demands more from us every day: more work, more productivity, more success, more validation. This demand is not just from our employers or families. It is built into the very fabric of our culture. The modern ethos values speed, efficiency, and constant motion. We are expected to be available 24/7, always connected, always productive. Technology, which has undoubtedly improved many aspects of life, has also played a significant role in fostering emotional exhaustion. The rise of social media, for instance, has created a hyper-connected world in which comparison is a constant companion. Every time we scroll through our feeds, we are confronted with curated images of perfection, perfect bodies, perfect lives, perfect successes. The result is a never-ending cycle of inadequacy. The question becomes, why don't I have what they have? The cycle is fueled by algorithms that push us to consume more, to compare more, to strive for more. But this comparison is rarely a motivator for improvement. Instead, it is a breeding ground for self-doubt, feelings of failure, and ultimately, emotional depletion. This obsession with comparison, combined with the pressure to be constantly on, contributes to a society that values output above well-being. There is little space left for rest, recovery, or self-reflection. The focus is on the next task, the next goal, the next milestone. This is where the deeper roots of emotional exhaustion lie. It is not merely a problem of personal habits or individual shortcomings. It is the result of a societal structure that prioritizes productivity over mental health. We also see this in the workplace. The once clear boundaries between work and personal life have dissolved, thanks to the omnipresence of technology. Smartphones, laptops, and email. Employees are expected to be available at all times, blurring the line between personal time and professional time. This always-on culture has led to a phenomenon known as workplace burnout, where individuals, often overachievers, are so consumed by their professional obligations that they lose touch with their own needs and desires. They are not just exhausted physically, they are emotionally drained. The corporate world has long operated on the belief that workers are more valuable when they are productive. But the fallout from this belief is becoming increasingly apparent. According to a report from Gallup, nearly 23% of workers worldwide report feeling burned out very often or always. The cost of burnout is staggering, not only in terms of lost productivity, but also in the human toll it takes. Burnout can lead to depression, anxiety, substance abuse, and even physical health problems such as heart disease. It is a vicious cycle. The more we push ourselves, the more we risk our mental and physical health, and the more we deplete ourselves in the process. But the crisis extends beyond the workplace. As we've become more interconnected, we have also become more isolated. Social media, for all its promises of connection, has created a paradox. Instead of fostering genuine relationships, it has often deepened feelings of loneliness and alienation. People spend more time online, interacting with people they may never meet in person, than they do with their family, friends, or neighbors. And yet, even in these virtual spaces, the pressure to perform, to present an idealized version of oneself, continues to weigh heavily. The constant pressure to maintain a perfect online persona can lead to profound emotional exhaustion as the pressure to keep up intensifies. People are left drained not just by the demands of the real world, but by the demands of a digital world that never sleeps. This incessant cycle of stimulation and comparison is not only psychologically damaging, it is financially lucrative for those who capitalize on it. The tech companies, the social media platforms, the advertisers, they profit from our exhaustion. By keeping us in a constant state of distraction and competition, they keep us engaged. The more we scroll, the more ads we see, the more data they collect, and the more money they make. In essence, our emotional exhaustion is not just a personal tragedy, it is the engine that drives the digital economy. But how did we arrive at this point? The answer lies in the cultural and economic transformations that have taken place over the past century. The rise of neoliberalism, the intensification of global capitalism, and the increasing dominance of technology have all contributed to a world that thrives on constant movement, constant production, and constant consumption. In the past, people had more time to relax, to connect with others, and to engage in activities that were not directly tied to work or material gain. But as the demands of the market have intensified, so to have the demands on the individual. The growth of the gig economy is a prime example of this shift. In many ways, it reflects the transformation of labor into a form of individual entrepreneurship. Workers are now expected to hustle, to be constantly adaptable, constantly available, constantly striving to make more money. There is no security, no guarantee of benefits, and no clear path to retirement. Instead, there is the constant pressure to do more, achieve more, and never stop moving forward. The result is a society that is always in motion, yet never truly at peace. But the epidemic of emotional exhaustion is not just the result of societal demands. It's also a product of how we have internalized those demands. As the pressure to perform intensifies, we begin to view our worth through the lens of achievement. We become convinced that our value is measured by how much we produce, how much we accomplish, and how successful we are in comparison to others. This belief is reinforced by the media, by advertisements, and by social influencers who constantly push the narrative that happiness and success are attainable only through hard work and achievement. The problem with this narrative, of course, is that it is never enough. No matter how much we achieve, there is always more to do, more to prove, more to gain. The modern epidemic of emotional exhaustion is not just an individual problem, it is a collective one. It is a symptom of a larger system that thrives on our constant striving, our comparison, and our unrelenting productivity in this world. Exhaustion is not a sign of weakness, it is a sign of compliance. It is a sign that we have bought into the idea that we must always be doing, always be producing, always be striving to be more. But what if the cost of this pursuit is too high? What if, in our chase for success and recognition, we lose the most precious thing of all, our mental and emotional well-being? The answer to this question may lie in learning to disconnect from the demands of the modern world, to take a step back and reclaim the space to rest, to reflect, and to reconnect with the parts of ourselves that have been pushed aside. But that will require a fundamental shift in how we define success and how we measure our worth. Until then, emotional exhaustion will remain a normal part of life, and the modern epidemic will continue to rage on as we stand at the crossroads of modern life, overwhelmed by the ceaseless demands of productivity, competition, and comparison. The question remains, is there a way out? Can we break free from the chains of emotional exhaustion that bind us? The answer, thankfully, is yes, but the journey toward healing, toward reclaiming our emotional well-being, is not an easy one. It requires a fundamental shift not just in individual habits, but in how we view ourselves, our purpose, and our place in the world. In this section, we will explore the potential cures for emotional exhaustion. These cures are not quick fixes or temporary solutions, but rather profound shifts in perspective and practice that, when embraced, can help restore balance and peace to our lives. The road to recovery is one that involves deep reflection, commitment to self-care, and a willingness to step outside the pressures of a society that values us primarily for our output. 1. The power of mindfulness and meditation. At the heart of many ancient wisdom traditions lies the practice of mindfulness. Derived from Buddhist teachings, mindfulness involves bringing one's attention to the present moment without judgment, without distraction, without anxiety about what's next. It's a practice that encourages slowing down, observing, and connecting with the here and now. In our hyper-productive, overstimulated world, mindfulness has become a revolutionary tool. It is a counterbalance to the incessant noise, the constant striving, the endless to-do lists. Through mindfulness, we learn to detach from the mental and emotional overload that often defines our days, instead of reacting impulsively or emotionally to every thought. We begin to respond with awareness. Mindfulness allows us to pause before we act, to recognize when we are approaching burnout, and to create space for rest in the midst of chaos. Meditation, a core practice of mindfulness, has been scientifically proven to reduce stress, anxiety, and symptoms of depression. Studies have shown that regular meditation helps regulate the nervous system, improve focus, and increase emotional resilience. It encourages us to sit with our discomfort, to face the emotions that have been buried beneath the surface, and to let go of the constant need to do in order to simply be. In this practice, we begin to recognize that our thoughts are not our identity, that our worth is not determined by our productivity, and that peace comes not from achieving more but from accepting ourselves as we are. The transformative power of mindfulness is that it allows us to live in harmony with our thoughts and emotions rather than being enslaved by them. 2. The art of rest in a world that places constant emphasis on hustle culture. The idea of rest has become revolutionary. Rest is not a luxury, it is a necessity. It is the antidote to exhaustion, the space in which healing occurs. Yet, for many, rest is a foreign concept, something to be done only when everything else has been accomplished. We have been conditioned to believe that if we are not constantly producing, we are failing. But true rest is not just about sleep. It is about creating intentional space for relaxation, reflection, and rejuvenation. Rest is also about reconnecting with our bodies. In the frenzy of modern life, we often neglect the signals our bodies send us: the aches, the fatigue, the tension. We push through, we power on, we ignore the signs of burnout until they become too loud to ignore. True rest involves listening to these signals, honoring them, and giving ourselves permission to slow down. The art of rest also encompasses the idea of doing nothing. In our overscheduled, overstructured world, we rarely leave time for idleness. Yet, it is in moments of stillness and solitude that we are often able to reconnect with our deepest selves. We allow our minds to wander, to reflect, to daydream, and to process emotions that have been stifled by constant busyness. By embracing rest not as a reward for productivity, but as an essential part of our well-being, we begin to reclaim our sense of balance. 3. Redefining success, the pursuit of meaning. Overachievement, one of the most insidious aspects of emotional exhaustion, is how it is tied to our collective obsession with success. Success, in our modern world, is often measured by external markers: money, status, accomplishments, recognition. But what if success were redefined? What if, instead of measuring ourselves against societal standards of achievement, we measured our success by the quality of our relationships, the depth of our personal fulfillment, or the peace we feel within ourselves? This is the wisdom of existential philosophy, particularly the writings of Viktor Frankl, who argued that the search for meaning is the central human drive. Frankl, a Holocaust survivor, discovered that those who could find meaning in their suffering were the ones who were most likely to survive. In his seminal work, Man's Search for Meaning, Frankl emphasized that life's purpose is not found in accolades or accomplishments, but in the meaning we derive from our experiences. This idea can be revolutionary for those suffering from emotional exhaustion. Instead of chasing external markers of success, we can turn inward, questioning what truly matters to us. The pursuit of meaning often requires a shift in priorities. It means questioning the life we have been taught to live and deciding for ourselves what values, relationships, and experiences are most important. This can be a difficult process, one that requires courage and honesty. But when we make this shift, we begin to free ourselves from the burden of external expectations and create space for a life that aligns with our true selves. 4. Building emotional resilience. Emotional resilience is the ability to bounce back from adversity, to adapt in the face of stress, and to maintain mental well-being in challenging times. It is not about avoiding pain or discomfort. Rather, it is about developing the strength to navigate life's inevitable ups and downs without being consumed by them. Building emotional resilience requires both self-awareness and self-compassion. It involves understanding the patterns of our emotional responses and learning to manage them effectively. This could mean setting healthy boundaries in our relationships, practicing self-care, and seeking support when needed. It also means developing a more balanced perspective on failure and success, seeing setbacks as opportunities for growth rather than signs of personal inadequacy. In the context of emotional exhaustion, resilience means recognizing when we are at our breaking point and taking proactive steps to protect our well-being. It may involve saying no more often, prioritizing rest, or distancing ourselves from toxic environments. Resilience is about regaining control of our emotional lives rather than allowing external forces to dictate our mental state. 5. Radical self-acceptance, saying no, and reclaiming control. One of the most powerful cures for emotional exhaustion is the practice of radical self-acceptance. This involves letting go of the need for external validation and accepting ourselves as we are, without judgment. In a world that constantly tells us we need to be more, do more, achieve more, self-acceptance is a radical act of resistance. The ability to say no is central to this practice. Saying no is not about being selfish or indifferent. It is about recognizing that we have limits and that our mental health must be prioritized above societal expectations. In a culture that glorifies busyness, saying no can feel like an act of rebellion, but it is, in fact, an act of self-preservation. By learning to say no, we are giving ourselves permission to protect our energy, our time, and our emotional well-being. In the context of emotional exhaustion, saying no means refusing to take on more than we can handle, rejecting the pressure to constantly prove our worth, and choosing to prioritize our own health over the demands of others. It is a powerful step toward reclaiming control over our lives and breaking free from the cycle of exhaustion that holds us captive. The vision of a different world. Imagine a world in which emotional well-being is prioritized over production, a world where people are encouraged to rest, to reflect, and to live in alignment with their true values. A world where success is measured not by external accomplishments, but by the depth of our connections, the authenticity of our lives, and the peace we feel within ourselves. This vision is not only possible, it is essential. The modern epidemic of emotional exhaustion is not an unavoidable consequence of modern life. It is a reflection of a system that has lost its way. By breaking free from the relentless demands of productivity and success, we can reclaim our emotional health and create a world where mental well-being is seen as the foundation of a meaningful life. The cure for emotional exhaustion, then, begins with us by taking the time to slow down, to reflect, to rest, and to redefine success on our own terms. It is a journey that requires courage, patience, and a willingness to resist the pressures of a world that tells us to keep pushing forward at all costs. But in the end, it is the only path to true healing. The journey through emotional exhaustion is a deeply personal one, but it is also a collective crisis. What we are experiencing is not just an individual failing, but a symptom of a much larger problem. A society that has lost its way. The constant drive for productivity, the endless chase for success, and the pervasive pressures to conform to societal expectations have taken a toll on our collective mental health. This crisis of emotional exhaustion is not just an isolated issue. It is the byproduct of a world built on efficiency, consumption, and individualism. And if we are to heal, we must not only reclaim our emotional health as individuals, but also challenge the very systems that perpetuate our exhaustion. The question then is not just how we, as individuals, can break free from the cycle of emotional depletion. It is how we can collectively reimagine the world around us, a world that values emotional well-being, personal fulfillment, and authentic connections over production, competition, and superficial success. It's time to take a step back and ask, what kind of world do we want to create? For far too long, we've been conditioned to believe that our worth is tied to our output, to the number of hours we work, to the number of tasks we complete. We've internalized the narrative that we are only valuable when we are busy, when we are achieving, when we are constantly striving. This mindset has led to an epidemic of exhaustion that knows no bounds. But what if we could challenge that narrative? What if we could create a society where mental health and emotional well-being are seen as foundational to our success, not optional afterthoughts? We must begin by questioning the very structures that have brought us here. The hustle culture that demands constant productivity, the social media-driven comparisons that leave us feeling inadequate, and the work-centric mentality that tells us rest is a luxury. These are not just fleeting trends. They are systems that have been woven into the fabric of our daily lives, systems that benefit from our exhaustion. And it's time to say enough. The first step in reclaiming our humanity is to take a hard look at our values. We must ask ourselves what truly matters. Is it the number of hours we work, the amount of money we earn, the number of followers we accumulate on social media, or is it our emotional health, our relationships, our sense of purpose and fulfillment? We are living in a world where success is too often measured by external standards, by what we do, not who we are. But it is precisely this fixation on external achievement that has led to our disconnection from our true selves. And it is this disconnection that fuels our exhaustion. To reclaim our emotional health, We must learn to say no to the pressures of a society that demands more than we can give. We must give ourselves permission to rest, to recharge, and to prioritize our mental and emotional well-being. This is not an act of selfishness. It is an act of resistance. Saying no is a way of drawing a line, of refusing to let our lives be defined by external expectations and the relentless demands of a system that profits from our burnout. But this is not just about individual action. While it is crucial that we take steps to protect our own mental health, the change we need is systemic. We must begin to rethink the way our society is structured. It is time for a shift toward a culture that values emotional health as much as productivity. A shift toward a world where we are defined not by our output, but by the quality of our lives and our relationships. This shift will require courage. It will require us to confront the deeply ingrained narratives of success and productivity that have shaped our lives for so long. It will require us to question the structures that uphold the grind culture and demand a new way of living, one that prioritizes rest, connection, and authenticity over relentless striving. We must ask ourselves, how can we build a society that nourishes our emotional health instead of depleting it? One critical part of this transformation is redefining success. Success should not be measured by the number of hours we work or the amount of money we earn. It should be defined by our capacity for joy, for meaningful relationships, for self-expression, and for emotional fulfillment. Success should mean finding purpose in the work we do, not merely checking off tasks on a to-do list. It should mean living in alignment with our values, rather than chasing the approval of others. To build this new world, we must begin by reimagining the systems that govern our lives. We need workplaces that prioritize mental health, that offer flexible schedules and a culture of balance. We need social media platforms that foster connection rather than competition, that encourage authenticity over perfection. We need communities that value human connection and shared purpose over individual achievement. And we need a society that recognizes that emotional exhaustion is not a personal flaw, but a collective problem that requires collective solutions. But this is not just a theoretical vision. It is a call to action. Every one of us has the power to change our own lives, to prioritize our well-being, and to begin to challenge the structures that perpetuate emotional exhaustion. It starts with small acts, saying no to unnecessary demands, creating space for rest, investing in our relationships, and reflecting on what truly matters. But it also requires us to think about the larger picture. How can we build a society that values emotional well-being and nurtures our collective health? How can we reshape the systems that push us to our limits and demand more than we can give? This is the work of a lifetime. It will take time, patience, and perseverance. But it is the work that we must do, both as individuals and as a collective. If we are to reclaim our humanity and our emotional health, the journey is long, and the road may be difficult. But as we begin to take the first steps toward healing, we can be assured that the path is worth it. The power to heal, to reclaim our emotional well-being, and to reshape society lies in our hands. It is up to us to choose. Will we continue to live in a world that demands our exhaustion, or will we choose a world that nurtures our humanity? The answer is clear. The time for change is now, and it starts with us. As we come to the end of this journey, it's clear that emotional exhaustion is not just a personal issue. It's a societal crisis. The forces at play, be it the unrelenting demands of modern capitalism, the hyper-connected world of social media, or the existential void created by a life focused on productivity at the cost of meaning, have conspired to wear us down, to make us feel as though we are constantly running on empty. But as we have explored, this doesn't have to be our fate. While the world continues to push us to our limits, there is always a choice to step back, a choice to reflect, a choice to reclaim our emotional health and prioritize what truly matters. The systems that demand our exhaustion are powerful, but they are not invincible. It is within our power to reject them too. Refuse to be defined by the number of hours we work, the followers we accumulate, or the endless cycle of comparison and inadequacy. We are not slaves to these forces. We are individuals with the ability to choose how we engage with the world. Reclaiming Our emotional health is not about rejecting productivity or ambition. It is about redefining success, understanding that true success lies not in the quantity of our output, but in the quality of our lives, the depth of our relationships, and our ability to find meaning in the midst of a world that often feels devoid of it. The real cure for emotional exhaustion lies in our ability to reconnect with ourselves, to embrace rest, to say no when we need to, and to live in alignment with our values. The world will continue to demand more of us, but we have the power to decide how much we give. It is time to stop being passive participants in our own exhaustion and start actively shaping lives that are more connected, more meaningful, and ultimately more fulfilling. The path to healing is long, but it begins with one simple step: the recognition that we deserve better. We deserve a life that nourishes us emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. So, take a moment, breathe, reflect, and know that while the world may try to pull you in every direction, the choice to reclaim your emotional well-being is yours to make. The journey is yours to start, and it starts today.